Welcome to the Autonomous Vehicle Lunch and Learn hosted by EVNoire. This panel, How EVs Can Elevate Communities Through Equitable Mobility, features autonomous vehicle and mobility experts. As autonomous vehicle technology continues to develop and reaches streets throughout the nation, it is crucial to use community input to guide autonomous vehicle deployment and ensure innovative technology elevates communities and supports their needs. We welcome the host, Prashanthi Raman, the Vice President of Government Affairs at Cruise, and the panelists, Dr. Shelley Francis, the co-founder and managing partner of EVNoire, Richard Ezeki, the Director of Infrastructure and Engagement at CH Planning, and Gil Tall, the Director of the Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Research Center.
Cruise is the first AV company in California to be permitted to carry members of the public in a driverless vehicle. And we are also in the process of pursuing our final deployment permit from the California Public Utilities Commission, which will allow us to carry members of the public in driverless vehicles for a fare. We're really excited about what lies ahead. We also operate a fully electric fleet today and are to date the only AV company to power our vehicles with fully renewable electricity, which we source from farms in California's Central Valley through our Farm to Fleet partnership. We strongly believe that the AV future must be all electric, given that transportation is the largest source of emissions in the United States. And that environmental harm is disproportionately felt by communities of color. It is why we are both passionate about the topic today, and we are very excited to be part of the conversation and hopefully part of a small step towards a solution in the future. So after we ask some questions of our speaker, we will also have the opportunity for audience Q&A. To submit that question, please type your question into the Q&A box at the bottom right of your screen. So let's get into some opportunities about AVs. I'd like to hear from all of you what you view as some of the opportunities that self-driving vehicles, particularly ride sharing, could present for underrepresented communities that experience inequitable access to transportation and environmental injustice. So Shelley, let's begin with you. From your perspective of your research findings, perhaps we could start with what you view as the greatest near-term benefits of self-driving vehicles for frontline and underrepresented communities.
Thank you for that question, Prashanthi. So I'm happy and excited to start talking about that and provide some insight. But first, I just want to give participants a quick high-level overview of the research that was facilitated. And so they have a better understanding of just kind of how this story will go. So just to give you a background, we facilitated using our equity framework, which uses a human-centric approach to engage communities and community partners and different key stakeholders. We facilitated this assessment in 2 districts in San Francisco with residents that were aged 21 years and older. So we facilitated both key informant interviews, which are one-on-one interviews. We facilitated an online survey, and then also we facilitated numerous focus groups as well. And so some key things that resulted in the findings, and again, like I said, we'll talk about different findings throughout our discussion today, but a couple key main points in terms of findings was that, there's still definitely a huge opportunity to provide education and engagement, whether it's campaigns and actual real-time engagement with autonomous vehicles to help really address the perceptions that community members have and that may make them wary of the technology. So they may be wary of electric and autonomous vehicles. While they're open to the technology, they just don't see themselves in it at times because they're just unfamiliar with it. So there's a wonderful opportunity there to continue that engagement, and we'll talk more about how we can engage with communities. Also, another critical piece is that we need to partner. Our findings indicate that we need to partner with organizations who have expertise in working with diverse and underserved communities to help increase awareness of an adoption of this advanced vehicle technology. So that, again, that means working in tandem and collaboratively with communities. So they're helping to guide us and craft those solutions that are going to be most impactful and will resonate with them. Now, to get back to Prashanti's question, in terms of some of the key benefits or the near-term benefits of self-driving vehicles for these particular communities, there I see several opportunities here. So the first one has to do with safety. So I'll put them in buckets. So first, safety. I'll discuss congestion in traffic, cost savings, as well as public health. So in regards to safety, when you look at data from the National Highway and Transportation Safety Administration, African Americans are killed in traffic-related incidents at a rate of almost 25% higher than white individuals. And the pandemic, interestingly enough, has really worsened this issue. So despite the number of miles driven having decreased due to the pandemic, because many people have stayed home, traffic deaths have actually risen in large part because people are driving faster on empty highways or less populated roadways. And when you look at data, the number of African American killed last year in 2020 or the year before last climbed 23%. When you look at other populations like American Indian, Alaska Native communities, their traffic fatalities have also increased significantly. So when you think about the fact that about 94% of serious crashes are due to human error, AVs have the potential to remove human error from crashes, which will really ultimately protect drivers and passengers, and could save, based on data from NHTSA, could save upwards of 300 to 500 billion. Point number two has to do with congestion in traffic. So we're spending a vast number of time in traffic. We're losing on average about 27 hours per commuter as of 2020, and that totals about 4.3 billion total commuter hours nationally. So low income and frontline communities can't afford to miss shifts. They can't afford to miss appointments and other commitments that vastly impact their quality of life due to time lost in traffic. And they're really the least positioned to bounce back from these types of disruption. Okay, so now I want to hit public health. So obviously there's well-established data that frontline and vulnerable communities, particularly African American and Latinx communities, are disproportionately exposed to particulate matter and transportation emissions. And so in 2020, we have upwards of almost 2 billion gallons of fuel being wasted due to being stuck in congestion, which in turn resulted in about 18 million tons of excess greenhouse gas emissions. And we already know that many highways and freeways are running through or near frontline communities. So then this lends itself to be a huge public health concern. And then finally, the last point that I want to make is around connecting to fresh food. So this is another opportunity of near-term benefits for AVs. So food deserts particularly are impacting frontline communities, and that means they have reduced access to fresh and healthy foods. So AVs could connect residents with grocery stores that would otherwise be inaccessible for vulnerable residents. And from our work, we found that with better and more reliable transportation options, frontline communities could certainly meet their food needs more easily, or even be delivered fresh food via AV route distribution systems. And then last, just when you think about expanding mobility options, increasing the autonomy of vulnerable residents, thinking about multi-generational households are often found in frontline communities. And so they have to share available transportation among multiple family members. So those older residents or individuals that may have disabilities that impacts their mobility options, if AVs were more widespread, greater awareness about the benefits and accessibility of AVs, this would help lessen the impact of transportation disparities from these members.
Thank you, Shelley. That is, fascinating in terms of the research and the findings. I know we're going to talk a little bit about education and some of the engagement opportunities from stemming from that research, but I think that lends itself, very nicely into a question that I had for Gil. From your work at UC Davis, how does electrification fit into the picture of more equitable transportation?
Thank you for the question. And the video is working. So guys, turn on the cameras. I feel lonely here. it's great. It's very clear to us, and we did the entire University of California system, the Institute of Transportation Studies. We did a big study for the state of California that shows that electrification will be cheaper, electric transportation will be cheaper and will be a better solution for everyone in California. Saying that, or in the US for that matter, saying that it's not going to be positive or benefit for everyone at the same time and for all locations. If we're looking at the total cost of ownership, there's a lot of headlines saying total cost of ownership of electric cars will reach parity with gasoline vehicles in 2023, in 2025, and so on. This is correct for some people, but if you drive an older car, if you do not control your electric rate, if you cannot install a charger at home, if you're not doing many miles every day, but you're driving in the inner city and so on, you will not reach price parity in 2023 and not even in 2030 for some cases. But you still can benefit from electric cars if we will create the right background for that. So the first thing we learn is that total cost of ownership or price parity is not one number. And different communities see different total cost of ownership when it comes to electric cars. And one of the best options to give electric transportation to all communities is shared and autonomous vehicles, because the starting point for reaching total cost of ownership is owning a car. Well, with AVs, we don't need to own a car. We can use electric transportation without owning a car. So our next step now is to see how all communities will benefit from electrifications. All people will benefit from electrification, and not just the new car buyers or buyers of relatively expensive cars today.
I think that is key. I think that one of the things that you had said, just in terms of all communities and the benefits of that, and really what Cruise is so interested in terms of being a centrally fleet managed, is to be able to provide to all of those communities as well. Richard, very interesting what Gil said with regards to sort of the equitable transportation piece through your lens, the lens of your work with CH Planning and previously with Urban Institute and CBCF. How does this technology intersect with the built environment for transportation and the societal needs in underrepresented communities?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Prashanti. That's a very good one. So when I think of this technology intersecting with the built environment and the needs for underserved communities, I think it's really about integrating those services. And I talk a lot about, in the work that I've done in the past, about multimodality and really like being able to connect this new technology to places where people are living already. And so when I think about AVs connecting to going places where where transit networks are able to get to. So for example, talk about micro shuttles. We talk about other ways of getting in AVs and EVs get into those places where transit can't get into, and therefore providing them more options for the people in those communities to get to where they need to go. And so I think when working with that, to be able to connect our technology to the built environment, they can really have to work together. And I think if we're able to do that, not only will we be able to really provide more options for people to get where they need to go, they're able to do it in a more cost-effective and time-effective way. So I really think that if you're able to put those two together, you can really make a significant impact and help people get around and where they need to go. So,
right. Well, we agree. I mean, AVs could present that unique opportunity to sort of democratize access to cleaner, safer, more inclusive transportation, overcoming a lot of the historic barriers of vehicle cost, air pollution, infrastructure failures. And so we're really looking forward to continuing work similar to what we've advanced with EVNoire to truly start that conversation with communities and how we can best serve those needs and goals around transportation technology. So let's move towards also understanding the importance and recognizing that thoughtful deployment will be critical to the broader success of AV technology. And equity has to be a core design principle for this technology. It would be great to hear from each of you, and now that we all can see your faces, on how AV companies can work most effectively with communities, policymakers, and thought leaders like yourselves to generate the greatest impact and avoid some of the possible challenges with AV technology. So Gil, can we start with you?
Okay, I will focus actually on AVs and EVs because I think that Shelley started with saying, I think that AVs and EVs, they have to go together. We are not even thinking about AVs as gasoline cars. I think that that should be something that we should not even consider. In order to get the benefit of AVs, they have to be electric. They have to be clean. They have to make our air quality better. They have to reduce greenhouse gases. And this is part of the promise. This is exactly the technology that will help locally and globally. And that's what's very important about it. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we are using the right charging infrastructure, that we are charging in the right time of day, and that we are doing everything we can to get the minimum footprint from our AVs. And I will not go today into the discussion of making the cars, but it's clear that we need to look at everything from mining the metals for the batteries all the way to scraping it after. But today I'm talking just about how to charge these cars. AVs have this great advantage of the ability to monitor and manage the entire system together, to know where each car is, when it's being charged, when it's being used, when it's being rest, clean, refreshed, and everything. And by doing that, we can get the maximum impact of charging these cars when we can get renewables during the day, on short stops, on fast charging we need, on longer stops when we don't need them, because the demand for transportation is a very peaky demand. So that's one of these big challenges of everyone want to go at the same time. We can do it because we can manage all of these cars together. So that's one thing. The other is that with the information we have today, we can pinpoint the need, not just of a neighborhood, society, a region, but a very specific household who have the right app or a specific user within a community. So it's not just about serving a community, it's about serving the people in need, people who cannot drive a car, people who cannot own or park a car in where they are going to in their destination. And when I was working on taxi cabs 25 years ago, it was much more simple than that. It was on one end, the people who does not own a car and want to go, my grandma, when she was going for shopping, carrying all of her weekend shopping, she was taking a taxi cab because that was just, the bus was not comfortable enough for her. And on the other end, it was the people that could afford driving but didn't want to. And everyone in the middle, we kind of dropped them. Today, we can actually manage everyone at the household and the individual level. And I will stop here.
Thank you for those incredible points. Shelley, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you for so just thinking about how AV companies can work more effectively with communities. One of the things that we need to do is really break the cycle of transportation inequities in regards to new transportation technology. So in order to normalize innovative mobility solutions such as EVs, AVs, you really have to, it's really critical, and you have to collaborate with communities that have been historically disadvantaged, are considered frontline, and have often been, have not been included in these conversations. So our team had the opportunity to partner with and work with Cruise to get a better understanding of some of these issues around the current landscape in San Francisco. And this was an effort in part as step one in a broader effort to meaningfully engage and incorporate equity as a design principle for service. So working closely with these community residents, community-based partners, and key decision makers that can benefit the most from this technology is really critical to increase awareness as well as normalize the technology and increase the adoption. Some of the findings that we gleaned from this research was that AV experience was really highly correlated with factors such as income. So we found, just to give you a specific example of one of the data points, only 6% of the participants making under 50,000 a year reported having written in an AV compared to those making 150,000 or more. 40% responded or reported that they had written in an AV. So our research is showing some preliminary findings in terms of warning signs that AV technology is maybe being disseminated along stratified socioeconomic levels. And there's some things that you can do to make sure that you don't go down that route. Another issue is that frontline communities have similar, if not greater, impressions about the technology after experiencing it. And part of that is that the reason for not putting vehicles in these communities, not due to lack of interest, but it's just maybe due to lack of planning or relationships to be able to navigate those key partnerships that would be critical to launching those vehicles in the space. Some other points that we found was that participants in both the highest and lowest income groups had the highest overall ratings of AVs, rating them excellent or good ideas. But again, there's still this lack of really understanding or interest. There's a lack of access, but not lack of interest. And then finally, only about a third of the participants who had reported incomes under 50,000, reported seeing an AV near their personal vehicle, compared to 2/3 of respondents who reported making 150,000 or more. So there's definitely a need to be intentional about where we're planning and putting these vehicles into operation. So there's equal opportunities to experience AV and technology. But if we take a step back and just think about AV is like the next step in EVs, right? And so those same communities have significant gaps in knowledge and awareness and opportunities to experience electric vehicles. So there's a couple of things that need to happen so that we can make that bridge for communities to get to and understand and better appreciate the benefits of AV. And then finally, I would say a couple last points would be that AVs obviously have the potential to really meet the mobility needs of vulnerable populations with disabilities. About 6 million communities or individuals have a disability that makes getting access to transportation difficult. So there's a huge opportunity here to really mitigate that transportation burden. And then obviously, finally, we need to, again, highlight the opportunity that we need to really be intentional in terms of our engagement strategies and the way that we seek to collaborate with and connect with frontline communities, and having the opportunity to facilitate a landscape assessment to really get a good community assessment, get an understanding of the community needs, really will help make that process much more equitable, as well as more productive and efficient.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I think we've seen kind of historically transportation access and income levels being very correlative in terms of being able to get around. And I think this is just magnifying that, but also giving us kind of opportunities and ways to look at this differently as we kind of create the future of transportation as we know it. Richard, would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Sure, thank you. When I talk about AVs, I always like to go back to the point of multimodality. One of my good colleagues and mentors talked about being able, doesn't matter what mode, is being able to have multiple modes to get where you need to go efficiently and affordably, because that's what provides economic opportunity and growth. And so for me, I think in the question that was offered in terms of how companies can really support the development of this technology to help underserved communities. I really am like focused on this idea of partnerships between transit agencies and these AV companies, and filling in gaps where transit can't get to, or it's too expensive to get access to. And so I would love to see, and we're seeing this in already right now. I mean, as we know, the pandemic significantly hit transit ridership. Some cities, like especially here in DC, ridership dropped 90%, and it's still trying to get back up to its pre-pandemic levels, if that's even the case. And so we're seeing innovative ways where microtransit is being used in cities like Arlington to connect people to opportunities, and working directly with agencies to provide more for routes for people to get to where they need to go. I would literally love to see AV companies and other transportation innovators really work with our established transit partners to really build out our systems to again provide multiple options to get to places where people, especially in underserved communities, need to go to. And I think if we're able to do that, you're going to see economic growth, you're going to see a social cohesion all go up, and that's just what's needed for our communities in our country. So I think really providing those unique partnerships and ensuring that as those partnerships do occur, that we're focusing on the goals of, again, maximizing access and that opportunity for underserved communities. That's going to be the way forward.
I really appreciate those remarks, because I think it also helps launch into our next question. But before I get there, I just want to do another shout out to anyone in the audience who'd like to ask Q&As. We're going to be wrapping up shortly our larger panel discussion, and want to make sure that your question is heard. So, that education and socialization piece is something we've continued to sort of highlight and allude to on several of the questions as well as the answers. And I think one poignant theme that stood out to me in the research that we've had the opportunity to see beforehand was how important engagement with those local communities was. And Shelley, you talked a little bit about that in your last answer, but particularly in building the trust in new technologies and AVs in particular. We share that value at Cruise too, of launching with communities and not launching at them. And so for Shelley, for Richard, for Gail, who maybe Richard, will start with you. What role do you see for education and engagement in communities that are beginning to experience EV and AV technology, particularly for certain populations that have been historically marginalized in discussions about new technology and transportation solutions?
Great question. Thank you for that. In terms of that role, I think to educate, I think people need to see the technology in practice. And so I love the idea of pilots. I love the idea of companies working with communities, to share, this is how this technology works. This is how it could benefit you. Try it out, see what it's like and how it works. And here's what it can do for your life and your families and your community, and really developing those opportunities to really try to see how technology works and how it impacts people. And sometimes if you see and experience it, like you sit behind the wheel and you watch it, and you turn on the car and you see it go where it needs to go, and you're in the passenger seat, you see technology like happen. It's just really, really amazing and powerful. It's like, wow, this really does work. And then when you're able to establish that trust between the operator and the community, that makes the relationship just even more powerful and more connected. And by doing that over and over and over again, and showing how these new technologies can really, provide opportunity for communities, then you start to see the adoption area grow. So I really think there's like those pilots, that hands-on experience is so crucial for these adoption technologies to move forward.
Great, Gail.
Yeah, when we study electric vehicle infrastructure, for example, we see a great risk for infrastructure gentrification. Sounds weird, but many cases, these really nice fancy chargers that pop up in different neighborhoods are only serving the high income newcomers to these neighborhoods. And you see them looking at that and, oh, that's not for me. That's a charger for the guests here, for the new guys. And we need to be very careful that AVs will not be also one of these gentrification tools that you see kind of roaming the roads, but it's not for you. And I think that when we talk about electric cars, the more traditional ones, the phrase is usually butts in seats. And it works just the same for AVs. And you need to find different ways to bring people into the vehicles. And that's working with the communities, but I will go back to, I'm always saying working with the people, working with the families, working with the neighborhoods. I will give just an example of someone, not my idea, but I wish it was, doing every week or two a different group of elementary school student that will get a ride to school with the new AVs or with the new service. They don't need to get it every day. They just need to be able to tell their parents about it and how to run it and how it works and what is it doing. Then you can make more people that talk about it and will want to try it. And maybe we will discuss it later, so I will just connect it. The cost per mile for electric AVs will always be higher than driving your old used cars the way I'm doing. But the cost, if you don't need to own a car and you can just drive it when you or ride in it when you need, it's great. And this is an amazing opportunity for us to subsidize the groups we need, to help the groups we need. We can pinpoint where to send our money and kind of avoid this gentrification issues I talked about. Mm-hmm.
Shelley, do you have anything to add? Great.
Absolutely. So I'll start off with just kind of repeating. We're focused on what role education plays in engaging communities with this new technology. And so in thinking about that, let's think about using a lesson learned. So we can use the initial adoption, acceleration of EVs in California, specifically where this research was facilitated as a lesson, in the sense that when you look at EV adoption rates, look at EV adoption rates, even with a plethora of incentives and rebates among African Americans, among Latinx and Hispanic communities, the rates for registered EVs for African Americans is less than 2%. The rates for Hispanic individuals is around 5%. So we want to make sure that we're engaging the right communities. We're engaging communities in a way that it's culturally relevant. What Richard said, what Gil shared is also very critical. So we find in our work that we've done, whether it's in California or other places around the country, the messenger matters, and what the messenger says also matters. So individuals need to be able to see themselves in this technology. They need to hear from relatable individuals as well as messengers that they can trust, like the celebrity model of getting folks excited and engaged about this new mobility technology isn't ideal, because from what we found that, you know, celebrities have other means for transportation and mobility that might be their fourth or fifth vehicle, whereas for other communities or individuals that might be just that one vehicle that they have access to. So those are a couple key things. Also, in terms of thinking about when you do education and outreach, so that message needs to be palatable. It also needs to be culturally appropriate and relevant. And then when you're thinking about just how you even frame this whole education and outreach strategy, having that formative research or like a landscape assessment is really critical to informing your roadmap or your strategy for engaging with community partners and residents or your specific, you know, audience. And that engagement needs to be continuous, frequent, and often. So it shouldn't just be like this one-time engagement and then we disappear. It should be an ongoing process, because you're going to probably need to tweak your strategy or your engagement efforts, you know, and refine them based on feedback that you're getting from your partners. And then the final point that I just want to share is that, you know, we're at a really pivotal point in time in terms of mobility, access, and transition. And so it's really important that we use a variety of tactics and evidence-based tactics and research to really inform the strategy and move this conversation forward so that we're really reaching the audiences that can benefit the most from this technology.
Yeah, I think that's really important to understand that it is not like a one size fits all strategy. It has to be tailored and it has to be understood, the community that you're sort of looking to engage and socializing around that. And that's very important for any innovation in transportation technology, but particularly for us at Cruise and through the autonomous vehicle space, really figuring out what the rider experience, the human in the car, is so crucial to success. And something that's really fascinating to me and something I've talked about in a previous life, but is really on the concept of old infrastructure and new technology. That's an incredibly interesting facet of this topic is that AV fleets are entering the scene at a time when transportation infrastructure, particularly in underserved communities or for workers with overnight shifts or in the hospitality industry, is insufficient. There's often inadequate pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure, with the built environment still overwhelmingly favoring personal car ownership in low income and disadvantaged communities. How do you see the future of EVs when it comes to innovative new technologies intersecting with legacy infrastructure design? Shelley, you're highlighted on my screen, so I'm going to have you go first. You just went.
Can you repeat that last question? I had a little.
Absolutely. How do you see the future of AVs when it comes to innovative new technologies intersecting with legacy infrastructure design?
So that's a really good question. So I think one of the things that we run into is, as you were sharing a few minutes ago, many of the communities that we're targeting are dealing with significant gaps in access to technology. So they don't have they don't have the bike lanes, they don't have sometimes regular bus services, but what we found in our studies was that they have readily access to rideshare. Rideshare rates were significantly high. About 75% of the participants responded that they frequently are using rideshare during the month. So there's an opportunity to introduce new technology in ways or in means that they're using regularly. So rideshare is an opportunity to introduce new technologies such as AVs. And so I think, based on that, the findings that we glean, that if we can be intentional in terms of thinking about creative ways to introduce this technology in ways that folks are already comfortable with and trying out, then it will be a smoother and easier process for them to embrace new streams of technology. So I think that's one way that you can approach older or transportation infrastructure and infuse it to make that transition to embrace newer transportation technology.
Gil or Richard, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can add something. I think the overarching question, and a lot of, you would say, skeptics of AVs would be like, well, they would ask the exact same question. Can AVs see road paint that's faded out? Can they work in rain? Can they work in snow? And, all these questions are still are being asked by some of the skeptics. So I think that what the challenge is going to be is how can we incorporate, and I think the infrastructure bill that was just passed, $1.2 billion and $1 trillion, excuse me, and the Build Back Better bill, which is being debated right now, and the massive investments that's going to be provided for our transportation system. I think if that integration of AVs, electric vehicles, of course, EVs, we're seeing that with the $7.5 billion that was in the bill. If those can work together, bringing in new technologies along with building out infrastructure and crafting a narrative from all different levels, from the private sector, from the public sector, how these can work together to really provide a better opportunity, better options for people to get to where they need to go, and being able to express that in examples. Then I think some of those questions about, well, how can this new technology can interface with our old infrastructure can be mitigated and even improved upon. So I mean, I think that can provide a positive uplift in terms of really putting those dollars to where it's needed in order to rebuild the infrastructure, while at the same time building out new ways, these new technologies, so that everybody can use them in a cost-effective and efficient way. I want to add that.
I, I I think these are really important points, and kind of just to add to it, the measurement side, we always talk about AVs as substitute for other, people will not drive their regular cars, or we will substitute electric miles, gasoline miles with electric miles, and so on. But it's not just about that. It's also not just about cost. It's a lot about improving accessibility, and especially for communities that have lower accessibility right now. And AVs is not just about greenhouse gases. It's not just about lowering the cost of transportation. It's very much about improving accessibility, working with multimodality options, working with non-motorized options, and improving accessibility for communities that today have low accessibility. And it can be high density location, it can be even lower density locations. We do have accessibility issues for many communities in the US that AVs can improve. So we need to look on accessibility, cost, and environment all together when we think about how they will be part of the bigger picture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, to have a holistic viewpoint on all of those aspects. So we come to almost time, but I do want to get this one very important question in to each of you before we transition into the audience Q&A. Another point of this research is the role that electric ride-sharing AVs can play in addressing local air pollution, particularly in communities of color that disproportionately bear this burden through roadway design. So Shelley, let's start with you. Based on the research and from this work and your previous research, how important is the EV adoption for autonomous vehicles when it comes to addressing environmental justice challenges?
Sure, it's critically important. We've already said that there's a huge body of work that shows that frontline communities are frontline communities, including African American and Latinx communities, are disproportionately exposed to particulate matter and transportation emissions. And so I think introducing this technology to these different communities who have a profound need for mitigating the impacts of transportation emissions is critically important. And so, for some communities, when we talk about adopting this new technology and getting access to AVs, it is about the technology, but for other communities, this is like a life and death matter. When you look at the fact that African-American children are 10 times as likely to die from asthma attacks, Latinx children, are also the next largest population to, die from asthma attacks. We can't stand by the wayside anymore and just kind of drag our feet. We really have to make sure that we are actively engaging with community partners. They want access to this technology. They want to know about ways that they can keep their families safe and benefit their health. They want to know, they want opportunities to have transportation to good paying jobs where they can have access to health insurance and have access to fresh foods, et cetera. So that really the time is now for us to move forward with providing the EVs as well as AV technology to these different communities. And as we've shared, it's really critically important for the communities to be able to, what we say, test, see, experience, and feel the technology and see for themselves how beneficial that it could be, and really normalize it and show them that yes, you can picture yourself in this. You can picture your parent, your kids, your family members, your neighbors, and they're people just like you, utilizing this technology in a way that benefits not just an individual, but the whole community.
Absolutely. It has to be sort of heuristic, multi-sensorial experience for them to really understand the benefits of this. And so those sort of things have to be addressed. Richard, from an urban design perspective, what decisions can cities or planners make today to best incorporate AVs into their transportation futures?
Great question. In terms of what cities and planners can do to incorporate, AVs, I mean, pretty much almost every city, they have kind of identified areas where they may have trying to build out new job centers or build out in new areas of movement in terms of transit. And so I think how AVs can fit into what planners are doing is, working with, having partnerships with the planning department and transportation department to say, okay, what are our new corridors that are being built out to bring in more movement of goods and or people are moving into the area, and how can AVs, particularly with their unique technology and unique uses, be able to provide services for people that are moving into the city, and also providing access to other amenities like parks and other places of recreation. So really having the collaboration between the transportation departments and the planning departments to make sure that, as short-term and long-term development plans are being put together, that AVs, figuring out where the AVs could play a role in, again, maximizing connectivity, providing options to get to those places where they need to go. So then making sure that some of the key indicators that the planners are looking to identify, which is like reduction of congestion, or trying to reduce travel times, reduction of pollution. So those kind of questions, those kind of indicators are very important as cities are being built out. Thinking how AVs can particularly play a role in addressing those issues that planners talk about all the time. So I think that's some things that could be looked at.
Absolutely. I think it's having been in the government at one point in time, it's very often times where you are in your own silo, and so that cross coordination piece is extraordinarily important to actually make that larger benefit be felt. Gil, the PHEV Center has done excellent work on electrification benefits of ride sharing. How does this carry over to AVs, especially when thinking about air pollution mitigation and public health for underrepresented communities?
That's a great question, and I will be careful because we are still studying the differences. But just kind of top of my head, we are saving quite a lot of miles moving from drivers to driverless shared mobility, which is always a benefit. A lot of the emissions, a lot of the environmental concerns are the deadheads and where the drivers live and where they leave the cars overnight and so on. And moving to AVs, we have much better control over the vehicle usage. We can reduce the greenhouse gas emission, reduce the travel of these cars when they, and the timing that they travel and so on. So it's looked like it's very clear that AVs will be better for the environment than traditional TNCs. That's very clear to me. At the same time, there are so many uncertainties that we still need to solve on how they will be integrated into the cities. And I think that with AVs, we are exactly where Cruise is right now, of demonstrating more than wide spread. I saw in the comments someone said we want it in Chicago. We want, yeah, everywhere, but we need to make sure that we're doing it right in the first few places and then jump to do it on the other locations. From our analysis, and Dr. Alan Jen is doing quite a lot of this modeling, and you can Google and find his reports. It looks like TNC will be better for the environment than personal vehicle driving, and AVs are even better than traditional driver TNC. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think what I think is also pretty unique here is that through coordinated charging strategies, the entire EV energy supply chain can go carbon neutral much more quickly than comparable human-driven ride sharing. And so through programs like our Farm to Fleet initiative, which also ensure that all the energy resources renewable power, that means we're avoiding upstream emissions from more carbon intensive electricity generation. That can produce that air pollution locally at the source as well. So it's just another opportunity to think about something from a holistic equity lens when it comes to access to clean air. Okay, so Vanessa may not invite me back to ever be a moderator if I do not move to Q&A right now. So I'm going to thank you all for your thoughtful perspectives and engaging and indulging in a lot of my questions. Let's move on to some of the Q&A. There has been one question that had sort of the highest number of thumbs up, so we want to start there. And I just pose it to the panelists, and feel free to come off mute to answer. How can AVs be of service use for community members with disabilities who face numerous intersecting challenges with accessing transportation? I did go to law school, so I'm happy to do Socratic method.
I'll try to address that. And I invite my fellow esteemed panelists to provide some additional comments as well. In terms of disabilities, for those who are disabled, I think, AVs particularly can provide an option for those people to get to job centers, to stores, to visiting families, because a lot of them, they are either they're unable to drive, either due to some sort of sight impairment or mobility impairment, and AVs can really provide fill in those gaps so they can still get to where they need to go, just like anybody else. And in addition to that, I think what that does, especially because unfortunately some people who have disability feel stigma because they can't do the actions that people who don't have disability can do. But now you have the ability to have this vehicle that can take you to different places with your family, with your friends. And I saw actually a question about this earlier about mental health as well. I think being able to have an opportunity for this technology to take you to places where you can enjoy, just life is so important. It's so impactful. And so I think in that sense, that AV technology can really provide that connection to life as a whole, and a more fulfilling life, especially if they're implemented in ways that, again, provide people who have some type of mobility issue or some type of other disability, and that they can minimize that gap. So I think AVs can have a really significant impact if they are targeted in a way that really provides a connection to community for those who are disabled.
And I'll add in here, when you think about the number of people that are reporting that they have a disability, approximately 6 million individuals report a disability, particularly as it relates to getting access or utilizing the transportation that they need. Was recently reading a white paper by the Rudderman Family Foundation that was speaking to this specific issue. And when the findings have to do with mitigating transportation related obstacles for individuals with disabilities, and that will help enable them, as Richard shared, get to new employment opportunities. And so for approximately 2 million individuals with disabilities, you have the potential with the use of AVs to save about $19 billion annually in healthcare expenditures, from missed appointments as well as when you think about the broader aspects or impacts of autonomous vehicles in terms of the dollar amount in terms of savings is 1.3 trillion. When you think about productivity gains, fuel costs, reduction in accidents, et cetera. And so there's a real opportunity to provide transportation, safe, reliable transportation to individuals with disability, with sight impairment, with seniors who, or other individuals who may be unable to drive their own personal vehicle for numerous reasons. So definitely huge opportunity, but again, it's very critical that we're doing the right research, that we can better understand how to meet those needs and really provide education and outreach and engagement to those various audiences so that they know that this technology is available and accessible to them. So definitely there's an opportunity. There's good research that shows that this AV technology could definitely meet that need, but we also have to think about, okay, the next step in terms of bridging that gap between the technology and then the consumer.
And I think that what Shelley is saying is really, really important. There are so many opportunities. And actually, I think that AVs have another benefit or side effect of being a big holistic system. So, for example, from AVs, we can ask from these companies to design vehicles that will be more friendly for people with disabilities. When we're using regular vehicles today that are just off the shelf, some of them are better than others, but they are not designed for different groups with different types of disabilities and so on. And the AV companies are usually also engaged in designing new type of vehicles that will be designed for these kind of services and can make much better job. Saying that, I really would like to kind of push for policy engagement and the policy intervention and subsidizing these kind of activities. I don't think that Cruise or any other private company need to do all of this, heavy lift for society by itself. For many years, we were kind of dropping every one of these issues on public transit, making it the bandwagon of society for every disabilities and so on. And I think that AVs can do much better job, but we need policies and we need the support of the policy makers, the decision makers to make it happen.
We agree. I think, it's also the policymakers, decision makers, but it's also the individual companies themselves. And, at Cruise, we view ourselves as sort of a leader in this space. We are exploring a wave variant. Many of us came from sort of the various transportation modes from the past and understand that there's a disability community as a whole, but also particularly for like the wheelchair accessible community that has been still an issue and something that we have wanted to explore and are sort of leading the conversation in terms of exploring that wave variant, having conversations and qualitative studies with users in those communities to understand and to better inform our product decisions and app decisions as well. And so there has to be sort of that symbiotic relationship because we can't advance the future of transportation without communities, particularly from communities of color, whether it be communities of color or communities disabled communities from those who are disabled, in order to advance a transportation that is going to take us into the next several decades. So very much appreciate a lot of those comments as well. I know that there's other questions in the queue, and so I want to be cognizant of that. So Gil, how about we start this one with you? Is there a larger economic ecosystem that AVs at scale could build? How do we help ensure that economic benefit is accessed by traditionally under-resourced communities?
This is a great question, and every change in society, we are worried about who will benefit and who will lose. And when we talk about EVs, AVs or not, if you are in the business of replacing mufflers or oil change, yes, you are on the losing end of society change. And if you are on the battery business or any other new businesses, you are on the winning side. And in the end, when we don't want to stop the change, we just want to make sure that we give the right tools for everyone to move with this transition. And AVs are like any other new technology. There are new opportunities. And Cruise already knows that the fact that you don't have a driver does not mean that you don't need employees. It's still a business that will need people to walk and clean and maintain the vehicles and run the system. And there are opportunities. On the infrastructure side, installation and so on, there are a lot of opportunities. And I think that at least in California, the state is aware to the need to have an education system and have the opportunity for people to shift to these new opportunities that are coming. So yes, it's happening. We need to be cognitive of it. And I think that there are more winners than losers altogether.
Yeah, and one thing I would add is that we've seen some successful models from the EV landscape where EV providers, whether it's buses, manufacturers, battery plants, have tapped into relationships with community colleges, various community-based organizations that have good relationships with members from some of these communities that are overexposed to transportation emissions, or that lay in particular areas where they're considered communities of opportunity. I think we can build relationships, successful workplace and economic development opportunities with AV technology, utilizing some of the best practices in those models that have worked for EVs. So as Gil shared, there's opportunities to work with the somebody has to maintain the vehicle, somebody has to, there's different ways that community partners, community-based agencies that work with diverse communities can collaborate with AV companies to make sure that they're training community partners in vulnerable communities for the different workplace and economic opportunities, that they have good paying jobs as a result of accelerating this technology. So I definitely think there's a roadmap out there of some good examples of strategies that we can utilize to help leverage this new technology in a way that is, resourceful and helpful in terms of thinking about economic opportunities.
Richard, anything else?
No, I think what Gil and Shelley nailed on the head.
You got
it. Yeah, I know we have a lot of questions. I want to make sure we get to those, but like they said, it's just on point.
Absolutely. Shelley, you actually mentioned food deserts in your first comments. Can you explain how AVs can help address nutritional gaps for underserved communities?
Sure, absolutely. So I shared a little while ago that about, let's see, a third of communities that we survey, that we worked in, are considered vulnerable communities. They're living in food deserts. That means they have no access to fresh fruits and vegetables. They may have to travel a mile or more if they're in an urban area to get to a grocery store. If they're in a rural community, that equates to about 10 miles or more to get to a grocery store. And so AVs have the opportunity to either using the food delivery model, bringing fresh fruits and vegetables to community residents, or taking community residents to places where they can get the fresh fruits and vegetables. So that's one opportunity. I know there's probably an example, Prashanti, that you want to share around food delivery and food access that has been extremely successful, particularly during the pandemic, when so many families have gone through different economic highs and lows. In some cases, more lows than highs, where they have had a need to partner with organizations that they're familiar with, that are in their communities, around food access and nutrition. So definitely, I'm giving kind of the opportunity, but I think it would be great for you to share some real world examples of how that is actually happening in the specific communities where we facilitated the research.
Thank you, Shelley. I very much appreciate it. When the pandemic halted all of us the first time in 2020, I know we're all sort of feeling the effects, even via this panel moved to virtual. Everything halted, and we had many vehicles that were just sitting idly by. And at Cruise, we really wanted to show how we could be good partners. So we partnered up with the San Francisco Marin Food Bank and SF New Deal, a local nonprofit, to deliver meals and groceries in and around the 7x7 geographical area of San Francisco. And to date, we're nearing 2 million meals and groceries delivered. 80% of that is actually to low income individuals, which we've been able to kind of see the ability to serve those that are in the greatest need. But we've also been doing that in a clean way. Every mile we drive is green. And so we've offset 92 metric tons of CO2 in the process. And to put that a little bit in perspective, I had to go back to math class. What was metric ton mean? That's as much as CO2 is saving 120 acres of old growth forest. And so, really trying to advance sort of that shared experience, and emission-free experience, as well as community experience, is something that is really the forefront and sort of the pillars of what Cruise stands by. And we've been able to provide that in what we hope is a meaningful way and moving it forward. That's why we joined the Pledge 1% program and establishing that we'll commit 1%, at least 1% of our fleet anywhere we're operating, and to social impact. And so things like that are really opportunities for AV companies and the future of transportation. So thanks for allowing me to share that. One of the questions, and this might be our last one, we'll see how much time we have. What can community advocates do to work together to move forward? How can those of us in the community get more involved? So Richard, I don't know if you want to take that one, or and then we can move on.
Yeah, I can definitely take that one. And it's, to be honest, it's a question of the day. Very, very important. I think in terms of engagement and how people can get involved, I think it really starts from working with your being an advocate. So, for example, we've seen, especially here in the DC area, a lot of community activism around the comprehensive plan, which is the long-term planning document for DC area, and pretty much every other city has something like that. So people are understanding how their cities and their area or the communities are going to be developed over the next 20, 30 years. And of course, a lot of these plans have discussions about the transportation options that are going to be implemented in these cities. And of course, AVs and EVs are part of that conversation. So really understanding how those plans are developed and how these new technologies are going to be a part of that. Being able to speak up your voice at these local government meetings or the regional meetings, and being able to be on committees that can help inform local leaders who have the decision-making power to allocate dollars to these specific transportation corridors where AVs are going to play a part. I think is very key. And I advocate for the regional engagement. I was involved with the Metropolitan Planning Organization here in the DC area, which develops the long range plan for the DC region. And they're talking about AVs and EVs up and down, left and right. And so I think being able to be in those communities, I've had the ear of the decision makers. And so I really encourage people to get involved at those committees and be able to have a say in how our local leaders are going to allocate dollars to transportation infrastructure in the future.
Shelley and Gil, anything from you in?
Yeah, I will come in and just highlight one of the frameworks that we utilize to think about this work and the relationship about mobility and communities. So the social determinants of health is a framework that really incorporates different factors in terms of how they impact where you live, work, play, live, and die. And so mobility, access to a medical home, the environment are all factors that are critically important and each have a kind of a lever in how in people's quality of life as well as in public health. And so in thinking about how do you future plan, you really have to incorporate this strategy along with equity frameworks into your strategy. And so having data like this formative data where you're doing the community needs assessment or the landscape assessment is critically important to just thinking about just where communities are in this conversation. And then that really helps identify where the pain points are, where there's opportunities. Very important to make sure that once you've done this assessment, that it just doesn't sit on somebody's desk or sits in a nice PowerPoint presentation. It's really important to continue to iterate and work with communities, get feedback as you go through this process. So, feedback on, hey, what should the engagement look like? What kind of engagement opportunity, what would make the most sense to community partners, particularly now that we're in this COVID space. So we have to be a little bit more hesitant or more cautious about doing face-to-face engagement. So what are some ways that we can engage communities that most need this technology, that are interested in this technology, that in a way that we can get them to show up and see the benefits of it. So that's another thing that I've been thinking about. And then because we've been able to facilitate this particular research project, we've been able to look at some data profiles of individuals or aspects that we can lean into in terms of where we might want to focus some of our planning. So for instance, looking at who are the participants that say like they're definitely interested in this technology, they want access to it. And then also look at the contrary to those who may not have said that they are highly interested in it, because there may be, and what we've seen is that there are gaps in knowledge about the benefits and how this technology can really make their life and their quality of life, their transportation and mobility needs greatly improve. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities. I think that the center of it is that you still need to really have your audience engaged, your consumers, your residents engaged in the planning process. So whether it's the disability community or it is, the different frontline communities, they all need to have a voice in shaping what the process and the solution looks like. Because we say in our work is that those who are impacted by the problem usually have the answer, have the solution, or at least some can provide guidance on what solution is going to be best for the community.
Gail, your thoughts?
I would like to add a kind of a short, what I would like the community advocates to do is to make my life harder. It's very clear, it have to be. The researchers and the policymakers like to aim for the averages, for the middle, for the big masses. It's much easier to organize, it's much easier to study, it's much easier to come up with the policies. And the community advocates need to tell us, hey, you're missing this group, or you're missing this point, or you haven't seen that group. So first thing is if you're advocating for a group that is underrepresented, that is not on the radar, you need to be loud and make sure that we include you in our discussion. And that's what we need the community, at least on my research side, is really, really important to keep us honest, to make sure that everyone is included, to make sure that everyone is getting the answers. Even if the answers is not the one you want, it need to be there, because then we know that we need to fix something in the future. But if you're not on the radar, you are not in the discussion, you will never be able to get the policies and the benefits from the changes. For us, the researchers, it's very, very important to get this feedback. It's making our life harder. It's more work, but it's the important kind of work that make difference in the end. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great way to end. I think that be loud and make sure you have a seat at the table so that your voice is heard. Thank you to the panelists, Shelley, Richard, Gil, for sharing your very thoughtful and very intuitive thoughts, but also something to expand based on your expertise and solution for the thinking. Very much appreciate our conversation today. Vanessa, I will turn it back to you as I know we are at time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. We're just going to do a quick closing here. First, want to express a lot of gratitude to our panelists, moderators. Shelley, thank you so much. Prashanthi, Richard, Gil, it was a wonderful discussion. I'm sure the participants really enjoyed this. We had a lot of great feedback and questions. So clearly this conversation needs to have some continuation and some space moving forward. We do want to showcase the research done in collaboration from EVNoire and Cruise. So you can see here there's a QR code on the shared screen, which will direct you to a summary sheet of the landscape assessment, speaking to the research done within San Francisco. And then also within the chat, if that QR code does not work, you can access that document that way using the direct link to the Google Drive. So just want to express a lot of gratitude again to our participants here that joined the call, as well as our panelists and moderators. Thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.